Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's breaking up. Hold on. Let me call you back on another line. I'm gonna call you.
Yeah, I hear you. How you doing today?
I'm doing good.
All right.
Yeah, how are you?
Oh, all right.
Staying safe, huh?
Trying to.
Oh, where's the 2020 copy?
Okay.
I
Hey,
read all those comments on your,
all right. You set up all right? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. How are you tonight?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Your family good?
Yeah, so far so good.
Nice to hear.
Yeah, how about yours?
Yeah, we're hanging in there. I had the kids over for Mother's Day and we just sat in the garage because we didn't let them in the house and had a couple tables spread out and kept our distance, but it was nice to see them nonetheless.
Oh, now we did well, ours is here every day anyways, because I babysat for 3 of
Right.
them.
Oh,
And
got
then
it.
two works for us. So I did text Chief and let him know if he see 4 or 5 cars in my driveway that they're here every day anyways.
Got it.
Yeah, so they cooked. It was nice.
JR's doing good.
Yeah, yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
When you
Yeah.
get forward, you go to, you out of the picture, you go
No,
forward.
we're not coming on yet. No. All right, let me mute.
whole bunch on
Okay.
and recording, so that's good. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
We are going to be recording this, and it's already started and uploaded, I think.
Oh, okay. How are you?
We're good.
Let's see.
Yeah, I'm think on there. Try to get to the location I want to do here. No, I can only
Let's see here. Heights.
Hey, Betsy.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Hi, Juanita. Hi, Betsy.
Hi, Frank.
Agenda.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Evening.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, everybody. Oh, thank you. Let's see here.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Dan.
Hey,
Oh,
Don.
Good evening.
Hey, Dan.
Dan. Oh,
It's still a
Dan.
beautiful spring day outside.
I know, it's beautiful, isn't it?
There's going to be a presentation then, Betsy, to start, as far as you know?
Well, I have on the agenda here. There is a presentation by the petitioner in Belle Oaks Marketplace. So yes.
Okay. Are
And
they
then-
going to do it via Zoom? Hi, Mark. Are they going to do it via Zoom, or are they going to do it, are they at City Hall?
I think they're doing it via Zoom. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then-
there's nobody, it's just Mark and I at City Hall.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that means he can stay out, he didn't have to come in from out of town, then I guess that's I guess an added benefit to this.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
When does the public get to speak?
Good question. I'm just looking at this. I see they're going to do a presentation and then they're taking questions. It says questions by council members. And then after that, it says testimony and questioning by interested parties. So I'm assuming that would be audience participation.
You're correct, Betsy. That is
okay.
correct.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
So Betsy, I didn't get a copy of that agenda. Do you have a copy of the agenda?
Yeah,
from
I got a copy from Todd. I'll forward it to you right now on your email.
I sent it out last night, Eloise. You should.
Okay, but my point is I keep getting emails from every email account I have. I have 4 and I don't know. I can't find it. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
It should be on your Richmond Heights email account, Eloise.
Okay.
I sent it out last night.
Okay, then I will look there. Then you don't have to send it. I should be able to find it. Thanks.
It was
Madam President?
later last evening.
Yes,
Madam
thank you. Yes, yes.
A gentlewoman who's online asked if there'd be an opportunity for her to ask questions, and I believe Betsy looked at the agenda and told her there should be, but maybe you can decide how you want to handle that.
Well, exactly as she stated, we're going to follow that agenda.
Great.
Yes, if I could ever find that agenda. You sent it out last night.
Hey, Eloise, I just sent it to you again.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, last night was Thursday night.
Monday.
Pardon me?
Last night was Monday night.
You're right, it was, wasn't it?
I know, it felt like Thursday.
It does.
These days just are.
Since the rest of us do not have the benefit of the agenda.
When I get it, I will.
Sense of the flow.
Yeah, we will share the screen. Sheesh, I'm going to share the screen if I ever find it. Okay.
Did you get it, Eloise?
I did. Now I have to go to, I got it, thanks.
Okay, good.
Once I find it, so maybe if I send it, 1 second, to my other account. I'm working on all these different computers, so go back, Betsy, forward. Okay, hopefully that works.
Yeah, I downloaded an upgrade. I think I might have got into a different mode here. I can see I see 25 people signed on so far in all their photos at once.
Cool.
That was always there. That's how I always do it.
There's 38 participants on the Zoom.
Okay.
I think it'd be very helpful to the council president, who is chairing this hearing, that nobody chime in until it comes to the point of you being acknowledged on the agenda.
Ooh, I can't find it. So Betsy, can you just share your screen? Because I'm having problems getting things coming through from sending. Can you share the agenda with everybody, Betsy? Share, pardon me?
I'll try. I don't know if I have access to do that. I think only the person who has Zoom, who runs this meeting, but let me see here.
Okay, because it's taking a while to pop up here for me. Inbox, come on. Oh, okay. It, I think, might be here. Come on, where you at? Where you at? That's all right, I got it.
Oh.
Okay, so hopefully now I can share my screen.
It's Betsy, Eloise. Betsy has the screen sharing privilege. You either have to.
Did you see, do you see my screen?
It's on there. We can
Well,
see
I
it
don't know whose
now.
screen we see. Yeah, we see your screen. I just found, I have it too. I have the ability, I think too. Yeah. Okay, but anyway, we see it. We need to decrease the size so that we can see it better.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for it.
How's that?
That's
That's
great.
good.
Thank you. So then, it is 6. We will start the hearing. Roll call, please.
Alexander? Am I
Yes.
just,
Yes.
Henry?
Just, pardon me?
Henry?
Yes.
Lentine? I know he's on there, I think. So.
Yeah, he's here.
Lewis?
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I'm here. My mic was off. I'm sorry.
Nelson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Here.
Ursu?
Yes.
Okay, so the purpose of this meeting today is that the developer with Deal Point would like to present information regarding, or a hearing, he would like to have a hearing regarding the formation of a new community authority for the Belle Oaks Marketplace, or Belle Oaks. I will hand this meeting over now to our attorney to talk about the format of how we're going to handle this meeting.
Thank you, Council President. This is a hearing that's mandated upon an application being filed for a new community authority. That mandate comes from Ohio Revised Code, section 349.03. The application for this new community authority was filed in February. We had an in-person hearing scheduled within the time frame of the statute, but the COVID-19 pandemic interfered with that. The state health director's stay-at-home order interfered with that, and so that had to be postponed and set up as a virtual hearing, which is what we're doing this evening. That hearing is for a presentation, of course, by the applicant. The applicant is Belle Oaks Marketplace, LLC. It is for the entire area of the former Sears complex at Richmond Town Square Mall, as well as Richmond Town Square Mall. And this hearing needs to be conducted as if it is a quasi-judicial hearing. What that means is it's almost held as if it was a court hearing. And so I am going to place anyone who speaks other than the judges, who are the council members, under oath of truthfulness. And so when anybody wishes to speak, I will administer an oath of truthfulness. And it needs to be conducted in an orderly fashion, as I said earlier. If you are wishing to speak, and of course the applicant's representative or representatives will have the opportunity to speak first and present their case. There then will be some questioning, as you can see on the agenda, of the applicant and the applicant's representatives by council members, and then any testimony and questioning by interested parties relevant to this application. And so hopefully the applicant's representatives will be available at that time to answer questions that interested parties may have. And then additional questioning by council members to follow up. And of course, the applicant always has the final say in any type of hearing. And then council can consider what it wishes to do with the petition, either approving it, denying it, approving it with additions, and when they might want to do that. It is not required that any final decision be made this evening. So starting into this at this time, I guess I would call on the council president should call on the applicant's representative to make a presentation, and I will place that person or persons under oath.
Madam President? Madam
Yes.
President?
Yes.
I have a question for Todd. Todd, when we get into the parts of the meeting where council people and interested other parties want to speak, will there be a time limitation on a question if I ask it, for instance, that I have to address Madam Chair and the speakers, or how do you envision that portion of the meeting?
Well, this is a quasi-judicial hearing. There won't be any time limits. But obviously, if there are duplicative questions, duplicative statements, the council president has the authority to cut that short if she wishes to do so.
Thank you, Mr.
Much
Water.
as a judge would do in a court hearing.
Okay, understood.
Okay. I believe it's Mr. Bell who will be making the initial presentation for the applicant.
Okay, so Mr. Bell, are you available to start to speak now or being sworn in?
Yes, I'm available to be sworn in now.
Okay, you may proceed.
Okay, and Mr. Bell, I do understand that you're an attorney and you're representing Belle Oaks Marketplace LLC, but I know you are presenting facts this evening, so that's why I'm placing you under oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now and hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God or the penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. As was indicated, the purpose of the hearing today is the presentation of a request of the developer Belle Oaks Marketplace for the formation of the new community authority, which would cover the area mentioned by legal counsel. And the process here is a statutory process. As was indicated, Ohio Revised Code 349 governs the process of creating a new community authority. And so before COVID hit, when we were all together in Richmond Heights at a council meeting, council had reviewed and approved the sufficiency of the property owner's petition, which was their initial request. And this is the second part of the process, which is a hearing. And then, as was alluded to, the third part of the process would be a council vote on whether or not the community authority is to be formed. The standard of review is spelled out right in the statute. The statute says that the community authority needs to be conducive to the public health, safety, convenience, and welfare of the city, and that the petition is intended to result in the creation of a new community authority. And if those conditions are met, then the city will, by resolution, declare the community authority organized, and then the community authority can proceed to conduct its business. So our standard of review for the creation is conducive to public health, safety, convenience, and welfare. And a lot of those facts are presented in the petition itself. The petition that you've already reviewed, indicates the name of the community authority, the property covered. There's certainly all the different legal descriptions of the parcels that are indicated. There's also a fair amount of information about the zoning for the district. The current plans, comply with all zoning regulations. A majority of the district is within the B2 regional business district zoning designation. There's a little bit in R2 residential, and those zoning classifications permit the development plan that's being requested, by the applicant. In addition, there are items identified in the petition, such as how the community authority is to be governed. And we'll talk a little bit more about the governance structure in a little bit, but that item's laid out in the petition. And then a couple of these facts that I think are pretty important to the standard of review. Remember, the standard of review is about health, safety, convenience, and welfare. There is a preliminary economic feasibility study that shows things like the size, the socioeconomic conditions, the financial plan for the development, and the developer's management capability. BELLE OAKS, owns and controls many millions of square feet of this type of asset across the country, and their management capabilities are laid out in the petition. Also, there's a statement in the petition about environmental laws. The developer has undertaken a phase 1 that covers a lot of the area, and it says that there are no environmental conditions that would prevent the development, but nonetheless, it's important to have a phase 1 so that you can conclude that the private improvements that will be built here can be built there, safely. So that gets to our part of our safety conclusion. Another item that is in the record beyond the petition is a blight study. A blight study was performed at the request of the developer, so that we could determine whether or not, first of all, is the property really technically blighted under state law, and secondly, so that we could evaluate for tax increment financing, TIF purposes, whether or not certain TIFs would be available for this site. Putting the TIF question off to the side, the blight study is still very good evidence about the conditions of the property conducted by a third party, and the blight study concludes many things that I think we all understand about the property. It is functionally obsolete. This is a prime example. This mall is a prime example of land use that isn't working anymore for the area. The mall is concluded to be an economic and social liability. The blight study indicates that there are significant building and fire code issues, and these issues have the potential to put the public at risk as they visit the mall. So the mall's condition itself is not great. Unsanitary and unsafe conditions. There's evidence of water damage, leaks, mold growth, and those things get at the unsafe conclusions. Site deterioration. In this category, there are things like potholes, sidewalks, curb cuts. If you drive around the mall, you'll see certain curb cuts that have deteriorated. Lack of maintenance is clearly present, and that's creating site deterioration in even the infrastructure that's needed to, let's say, drive across the property or access the mall site. Those endangering conditions, are also present. There was a fire inspection report which concluded there were certain egress doors which were out of service, certain exit signs that were not operational, emergency lighting systems that were not operational, carbon monoxide alarms missing, issues with the fire alarm system, and so on and so forth. So those conditions are clearly ones that in its present condition, this site has some endangering conditions. And another fact which is relevant, I think, to the general welfare as well as the lack of investment is that the existence of tax delinquencies at this site, the failure to correct certain code violations, and the deteriorating conditions are only further complicated by the failure to pay taxes. And so that's kind of the essence of the blight study. Those characteristics are items that are laid out in various statutes that you can analyze. But as you see, taken as a whole, the blight study itself is pretty good evidence that The current condition is unsafe and needs to be rectified, and a future condition, if properly developed, would result in the increase in the safety and welfare and well-being of the people of the city. So wanted to mention those two items. I actually have a presentation with some slides that I'd like to present. I think that I can share my screen to do that, but I'm not sure if Betsy can let me do that. But let's see if I can. Yeah, I can't do it while you are sharing, Betsy. So
Okay, let me get off of that somehow.
Yeah, one person at a time.
Okay, new share.
okay, let's see if I can share mine now. Yeah, okay. So let's share that and see if it works. Okay. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna scroll through this because I'm not sure I can get the sizing to work just right. But we will provide this presentation to everybody following the hearing. As indicated here on the map, you can see where the mall site is. It's down here in the orange. And the site of the new community authority is that same site. It's the same general property area located within the city boundaries. So you can see there where it's at. A number of items that we'd like to update on in terms of project progress and status. Site improvements have been issued for bidding. Mall demolition is out for permit. Leasing update is there. That's for the new leasing center. There's an issue for the permit on April 14th, and bidding would be on May 15th. And then there are the individual building issues for bidding and permit. All of that is contemplated with phase 1 of this development. Phase 2 would be the additional phase, and ARB has recommended that for approval on February 3rd. Planning Commission recommended it on February 12th. P&Z recommended on April 14th, and City Council approval is currently pending. So how does the new community authority really work? Well, this is how the board functions. The board is a board of 7. That's what's being proposed in the petition. And that would consist of 4 members appointed by the City of Richmond Heights and 3 appointed by the developer. And that's intentional. It's intended that there be a balance of power in favor of local government to properly carry out the development plan. It's also intended that the developer has a significant role in the process. Obviously, their funds are at risk and their property is at issue. And so you really kind of end up hand in hand on this board, working public and private together on a defined plan. And I think that that's important for everybody to remember, that this plan is not going to be unwieldy. This plan is going to be really well defined. And carrying out that plan will involve discretion at the council level, as you all, as council members, determine how to zone this property and how these approvals go forward. But once you get into the actual plan, you don't really deviate from the plan. And that's important because all of the community authority documentation, it gets memorialized in a recorded instrument that's recorded on the ground. And with that type of a restriction on property, you really want to carry out the plan correctly. So a lot of discretion at the city level. When we get into the authority board, there's really less discretion because you're carrying out a defined plan that's being proposed. Risk allocation is an interesting concept for community authorities. And here, the city is not being asked to provide any tax support for this project by way of direct subsidy. The tax abatement is the real primary kind of contribution of the city. The city is not being asked to guarantee bonds. The community authority is not being asked to guarantee bonds. At the end of the day, the property owner is putting their property at risk, and that property is going to guarantee debt service on bonds. And that property is subject to risk of loss. If, in fact, the bonds don't perform, the owner of the property, which will be Deal Point Merrill, would be 100% at risk for losing their property as a result of a bond default. In terms of sources and uses on a project, you tend to see projects with in the left-hand column, some developer equity, usually a construction loan, and then oftentimes there's a gap, and you need to fill that gap. And on the right side, you can see what the costs might be for a project this size: land costs, soft costs, financing costs, construction costs, and you can just see how developers, even with a lot of equity in the project, may still face a funding gap as they work on all of these different components and costs that are needed to make a project this complex to come to life. So this is a breakdown of the sources and uses. It's a little more specific to this project. Developer equity shown at $45 million, the construction loan, and the gap here pencils out to about $68 million. And that's of a $288 million financing. And you see the land costs are a lot smaller than the previous slide. The soft costs and the management costs are present. Of course, there's a lot of construction costs because a lot of buildings going to get built. But we still have that gap of $68 million, and it's got to get covered in one way or the other for the project to be able to proceed. So this slide indicates how typical funding sources work for projects that we may see across the community. So if you were to imagine a historic renovation or an adaptive reuse project, you might see 60% as a bank loan, some developer equity, and the gap there would be covered with tax credits, like historic tax credits, federal or state, maybe city county grants, maybe property tax abatements. And with a historic project, you'll see those types of gap fillers. With an affordable housing project, a little different. You might have a housing trust fund come in to fund some of the project. You might have a HUD funding to get there. City grants are possible. And then when you get to these urban mixed-use projects, oftentimes you'll see things like new market tax credits, opportunity zone investments, certainly property tax abatements. That's important to make these projects pencil. A lot of times you'll see city or government support. And here, when we look at the Belle Oaks project, you can really see that what we're doing here is not asking the city to provide any type of direct subsidy or credit enhancement, and rather the property itself, through the property tax abatement, the NCA charges, and the TIF program, will cover the gap. That's the important aha moment here. The property itself and all of those tax-like payments paid on the property cover everything that's needed to make this project happen. Without the NCA and without the TIF, the property doesn't pencil. The project won't pencil because the leverage won't be present. When we refer to leverage, we refer to the difference between the green and the red, really. The green is this kind of construction loan, and a lender is willing to lend up to 60% as long as there's some equity in the deal, that's the blue, and as long as that gap is covered, that's the red. But if the gap is gone, the lender won't lend 60. They won't lend 0. They just won't lend at all. If the lender doesn't see 100% full, you won't have a successful project. So what we're really trying to do with these tools is use the property taxes, the NCA charges, and the TIF to round out this project and fill this gap, but doing it without without city support. So here you can see between the property taxes and the TIF and the NCA mechanism to issue the bonds, you're getting where other programs are used to get there. We're not using tax credits here. We're not using low-income housing here. We're not using direct city-county grants here. Instead, we're really relying on the property and its ability to make tax payments to fill this gap. I think it's interesting and important as council is considering its decision about enhancing the welfare and well-being of the city to just look at a little bit of a history of the property tax value. The phase 1 tax value on the site from 2015 to 2019 is just declining. The overall tax value is there in blue, and the base land value is there in orange. and it continues to decline. So what we're hoping to see is a big upswing as the development begins to occur. This slide may be a little hard to see. I'm going to see if I can't try to zoom out a little bit, guys. Sorry. It's a little difficult to do this sometimes on Zoom. So let's see if you can see the whole slide there. This slide is really indicative of what happens through the life of this transaction. The tax abatement for years 1 to 15, it's got some value. And that value is going to be converted into a community charge. So instead of the property owner pocketing the tax abatement, walking away with it, property owner is going to say, okay, I get the benefit of the tax abatement, but I'm going to replace that abated tax with a community charge. That way I can recycle that money that's generated by the property tax payments on the site into the site. And so when council has authorized, the procedures and rules to create an abatement, that's a positive thing, but it's not one where the developer just pockets that abatement and walks away with it. Instead, what the developer is requesting is a mechanism to recast that abatement as a property tax charge that can then be used towards the site. So recycle the money back into the site. That's how years 1 to 15 go. Years 16 to 30 are a little different. The abatement is gone. After 15 years, the abatement rolls away for a building. And so what happens then is the TIF takes over, and the TIF mechanism will divert the property taxes paid on that building, again, diverted into the site. So it kind of just depends on which year you're looking at, but overall, the property is going to pay a like amount as taxes all throughout its life. And these mechanisms like the NCA and the TIF are being used to recycle the money into the project, primarily by paying debt service on bonds, which will be used to construct a significant portion of the project. So that's kind of the finance plan. This is an economic analysis summary. And of course, this is very detailed, so we'll provide these slides after. But the economic analysis impact indicates the different investments that are made, as well as many of the recurring tax revenues that are generated, including city income taxes from apartment residents that are new, income taxes from construction jobs, and of course, the real estate tax impacts. So we won't go into excruciating detail here, but just note that these additional tax revenues, they're an add, they're an extra, and that's a really valuable fact that makes your conclusion about this benefiting the welfare of the community real straightforward. Here we are. We've got it zoomed in a little bit, and phase 1 is the column to the left. Phase 2 is the middle column, and the sum total is this right-hand column. And you can see the different tax categories, including Richmond Heights School District property taxes and South Euclid School District property taxes, county tax revenues, Ohio tax revenues, new jobs, new residents, and the construction jobs. The construction jobs will be temporary, obviously. The 1761 is kind of over the rolling period that it takes to build the site. This slide, I think, is probably the most important one. And this is the projection of tax value over a 30-year period. And this projection is based on real numbers that are the costs of building the assets. And we went so far as to talk with the county fiscal office about how they would evaluate those costs when those costs are materialized into buildings. So this is a fairly detailed analysis went into producing this report, which indicates that by full build out in 2023, the tax valuation will be well over $50 million. And then based on historical trends in the county, that tax valuation will trend upward over the life of the development. The other very important part of the slide is the orange, and that's the base land value. This is the value associated with the tax value associated with the site, assuming nothing is done to the site. And so that's your difference. The difference between the blue and the orange is really what makes investment in this site make sense. And these dollars, the taxes paid on these values between the blue and the orange are really the taxes that are used to close that gap that we mentioned earlier. Not to mention, a lot of the difference between the blue and the orange is recycled to the school district and eventually to the city once the bonds get paid. So there's definitely a benefit to the other taxing entities, because once we clear debt service, there's no need for the bonds to take excess revenue. There's opportunity for excess revenue to flow to the taxing jurisdictions. And finally, we have a bit of a timeline here. This is where we're at in this deal. We have a couple timing factors that are going to require getting to a closing by September 1. And so what we've done is work backwards and conclude that we've closed on bonds on September 1 in the schedule. And this schedule shows you all the little pieces that have to fall into place in order for us to get to that time frame. And if you consider the city's actions, we've got the NCA public hearing and approval of the NCA, scheduled here on today's date. And then we've got a need for the city and the schools to reach agreement on a TIF program. And we really need that to occur by about the end of June in order for us to make this timeline. And why is it so critical to make this timeline? Well, we're going to miss the market. We're going to miss the market on the lenders who are not only tracking this project already, but who are expecting certain cost parameters based on 2020 activity. If that construction activity gets pushed into the following year, not only have we delayed the project, but we also have different pricing. In other words, there's some hold the pricing activity going on right now, and that pricing will not hold once we get past this September timeframe. So we're concerned about the pricing risk and frankly, the ability of the project to happen if we are too far out in the future. So with the city's action items outlined in green, you can see what the NCA needs to do. Once it's formed, there would be an organizational meeting. The NCA would have to have a couple finance meetings in order to get to a point where it could issue bonds. So we've laid those out in August. We really have a lot of action items that need to occur in July and August for us to be successful in getting money available to implement the project there on 9/1. So I will stop sharing my screen and I wanted to conclude with a couple other notes real quick. You've heard from the applicant regarding the petition, and you've heard from the applicant regarding the Blight Study. We've presented the general parameters of the new development, and at the end of the day, the standard of review is again whether or not the city council concludes that this new community authority and the development activity plan would be conducive to the public health, safety, convenience, and welfare. And we believe that burden's been satisfied in a number of ways. I would also note, just for council's benefit, we did receive questions about the NCA process from economic development and law. We did respond to those questions in writing. And we're happy to talk about any of those individual questions if you like as well. So I'll leave the presentation at that, and I'm glad to take any questions.
Any questions from council members?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. The one that we submitted the questions and the answers, Belle Oaks submitted their response, but I'm still a little confused. If the NCA has no financial impact upon the two school districts, Richmond Heights and South Euclid, which Lyndhurst, why is there approval required to establish the NCA?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is the distinction. I would encourage you to make a distinction in your mind between the NCA itself and the other programs that are being used to fund the site. The TIF programs are the ones that will require the school district's consent. those are the items that directly involve diversion of school taxes. And that's where it's necessary for the school district, the city, and the developer as a party in interest to all reach an agreement about the way that diversion will work. The NCA itself does not directly impact the schools one way or the other. The NCA doesn't divert school money. It doesn't pay the school any money. The NCA is really a mechanism for collecting revenues from the site and then issuing bonds. One of those revenues, though, is this TIF item over here. So separate the TIF and the NCA in your mind, because the TIF still needs to come before council, of course, and that's going to require the school's consent based on this being a 30-year TIF with school participation. So I hope that answers your question there. The NCA itself doesn't really do anything in respect of the schools. Occasionally we see NCAs where a school representative is on the board of the NCA, or other, kind of involvement occurs, but it's not economic in this case.
Okay, one last one. So the TIF will require the school board's approval?
Yes, so the TIF, it needs to be put through school approval. The reason being, first of all, it's a long-term TIF. It's a 30-year TIF. And secondly, what's being proposed is not a non-school TIF or a make-whole TIF. Those discussions are ongoing. I would refer council to, Ken Fisher and other local counsel for the developer, as I am not conducting the TIF negotiations in this project. However, I would tell you that those negotiations will result in the school getting a formal notice of the TIF and then having to take action on that.
All right, one last thing, and I promise this is it. Is the TIF involved in the financing associated with the NCA? And if so, what is the relationship and who benefits and how?
Yeah, those are good questions. So again, the NCA it's a collector of revenue. Okay. So you have to have revenues to come in for then the NCA to pay principal and interest on bonds. And so there's two different revenue streams that are the primary revenue streams. The first is the NCA charge itself. And that replaces the abatement. That's that first 15 years that I was talking about, where instead of abated taxes, the NCA charge will replace those taxes. So that's one of the two revenue streams. The other is years 16 to 30, and that's the TIF revenue. And that revenue comes in to the NCA and is used to pay debt service on bonds. So it's really, at the end of the day, it's one 30-year period that results in the property owner paying the same amount that they would have paid in taxes. But under Ohio law, we have to use these two different mechanisms in order to generate revenues that are available to pay bonds. So the TIF is involved, and the NCA would receive an assignment of TIF money in order to pay debt service on bonds. But the TIF approvals are separate from this NCA process.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have a question. In reviewing the slides for the NCA and the CRA and the TIF, what exactly is the value of the NCA when you have the CRA and the TIF, and the period is up to 30 years? How long is the NCA going to be involved? What's the time? Because I'm saying that it's indefinite or infinite, could go on and go on. What's the time period? Can it go as the same as the CRA?
Great question. Councilwoman, the NCA will have a life that's as long as the bond financing. So the bond financing runs out for 30 years. And really and truly, it's likely to be 30 years following the last building that's built. So if we get through phase 2 in 2 or 3 years, you might see 30 years from that period of time. And the reason why it's not just 15 years is because the NCA is the issuer of the bonds. The NCA will issue bonds that are invested by investors. And so as the issuer, it needs to continue to exist until those final payments are made. The NCA's existence is about how you pay mechanically debt service on bonds. There's a separate issue that the NCA enables, and that's the community charge. There's actually a charge on property that gets certified to county fiscal, gets paid by property owners. That only lasts for 15 years in reality. The substantive effort of that is 15 years. And that piece, that charge on property, is just replacing the abated taxes. So if before the abatement taxes were $100 and after the abatement taxes are $2, the NCA charge will be equal to $98. And the NCA charge will just take you back to 100 again. And those $98 will be used to pay the debt service on the bonds.
Thank you. Another question is, since the city will not be liable for anything, is what I'm hearing, why do you need the city involved? If it's no value within the city, we're not gonna get anything or anything except for once you fill up, we'll get the income tax for the individuals that will work there. But if there is, the city is not going, there's no limitation, no risk for the city is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what exactly is the value for the city?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So what the General Assembly concluded when the General Assembly authorized community authorities was that it was really appropriate for local government, where the territory is occurring, to have the final say on whether or not there could be this type of limited liability entity created. So General Assembly gave the power to municipalities to decide whether or not community authorities be created within their jurisdictions. So that's really fundamentally the answer was a policy choice by our legislators. I would tell you that the reason why, despite the city not kicking in any money, it's important for the city to be involved is fundamentally that governmental control piece. 4 of the board members would be appointed by the city. It is a public entity, so it's appropriate to have public control, public majority control. And, you know, so it's kind of more like the city has a gatekeeping or a watchman type approach. The city is watching the system and making sure it's all within the boundaries of the law and the purpose of the authority, more than it is about the city, you know, kicking in money or being exposed to risk.
Okay. And one more question. What if the developer starts a project and something goes wrong beyond our control? Who is responsible at that time? Would it be the bond, the residents, or whom?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's one of the reasons why it's very important that this is understood as a bond transaction, because at the end of the day, the bondholders will be bearing the risk, the success or failure of this site. As to their investment, the bondholders are not making 200 million of investment. They may end up making 50 or 60 million of investment. So on the one hand, you may have a construction lender, a traditional lender who makes 100 million of investment. On the other hand, you may have a bondholder who makes 60 million of investment. But as to these taxes, if these taxes don't get paid, the bondholder is ultimately the one who is subject to loss, the risk of loss. The bondholder can try to get the value out of the property. There's the tax foreclosure process. And so the county might proceed through a tax foreclosure if there were delinquent taxes on this site. We're going to burden the site with significant tax liability over these 30 years. So the bondholder could try to get value by selling the property. But if they don't get value out of selling the property, they're ultimately at risk of loss. It's not the city, and it is not the taxpayers. There's no subsidy being requested by the city. So if anything, the city would be exposed at that point, Councilwoman, to the idea of opportunity loss. You've lost the opportunity for the deal that you thought you had, or the benefit of that deal. And, you know, it's difficult to predict if there'll be a downturn in 10 years or 20 years. We don't know, but that would be the real thing that you risk is the thing gets built and then you lose the opportunity for it to be great. It's only okay or good.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I have a question.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Bell, this is Councilman Lentine. My question to you is about the structure of this community authority, this new community authority. I understand it's 4 members appointed by the city and 3 by the developer. I understand that. My question to you is this, are these terms for these individuals? Is there terms? Is it staggered or is it ongoing? How long does it last? Can we replace these people? Can you please help me with the structure of how these members will be served?
Sure, Councilman. It's a great question. So the members will end up having essentially 2-year terms, and those 2-year terms will be staggered to start so that, and council can decide how the start of those staggered terms work.
For both, excuse me.
Yes, for both.
For both the city and the developers?
Yeah, so council could say, okay, well, everybody has 2-year terms and these 4 members, 2 developer, 2 council start with 2-year terms. And these 3 members start with 1-year terms. So council can make that choice. The developer, their role is make sure 3 people are appointed. So as those expire, they'll be reappointed by the developer throughout the term of the life of this transaction. Similarly, the council member representatives will be reappointed until such time as we reach a population threshold or another trigger that causes perhaps election of people who live in the district to the board. That's a possibility. So on the whole, 2-year terms, renewable terms, bylaws get prepared and approved by the authority when it has its organizational meeting, its very first meeting of its life. And in the bylaws, there are conditions, parameters around how do you replace a vacancy, how do you renew, so on and so forth.
How often would
be
this
on the board
committee,
for 20 years?
how often would this committee hold meetings?
In the year in which the development starts, we think it's probably 3 or 4 meetings that need to happen in order for everything to get off the ground.
Public meetings, I assume?
Public meetings, absolutely. It's a public entity, so they're all subject to open meetings. Then you end up with, during the development phase, some still, 2-3 meetings a year. And then once you get past the development phase and you're really in stable mode, it can all be boiled down to 1 meeting a year. But usually that does not occur until after the build out of the development. So if we project that the development runs to 24, you might have 2 or 3 meetings a year until 2024, until such time, then after that, you'd have 1 meeting a year, essentially to certify the charge and prepare the financial reports each year for the tax collection process.
Just one last follow-up, please. The members that are on this committee who chooses the chairman of the committee? Amongst themselves?
Amongst themselves, yes. Chair and vice chair are board members of the committee.
Does it have to be one from the city and one from the developer? No. Can it be just any 2 of those members?
Any 2 of them. The secretary and treasurer can be appointed. Oftentimes we see, an appointed secretary or an appointed treasurer. Sometimes an accounting firm is hired and they're appointed as treasurer. Those can be, it's also possible to have the secretary and treasurer be board members. So it's totally up to the board at that point. There's just a few parameters in the statute about how you do those appointments.
Is there any compensation for these people?
There can be, there is not, until the question was posed, I guess nobody had really asked a question, but yes, you could possibly compensate folks, maybe a per meeting or per diem kind of, thing that's within the boundaries of the statute.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, can you hear me? Oh, your mic is off. Well, I was wondering, he says there's 7 members. We understand that 4 are appointed by the city. How does the developer chooses their members, the 3 that they choose?
Great question, Councilwoman. So those developer members are appointed by the developer. And what the developer has indicated to me is that they expect they'll have 2 of their principals, 2 of the people who own their company, as appointed representatives. And then they will have 1 person who's a local professional, local to the Cuyahoga County area, serve as a representative. The new community authority is a public body, so it does need to meet just like council does. And sometimes having a developer based in California makes it a little difficult for the developer to attend every meeting. So they intend to have at least one of their 3 representatives be a local professional that they've hired, to be on the board. It won't be me or my law firm, but it might be, one of the development team that you've interacted with before on the project.
Thank you.
I have a question too. This new community authority, will they have the ability to be a taxing agent? Can they go out and say, I want to go for levies?
No taxing power.
Good.
To your question, Councilwoman, you're really getting at the idea that it's entirely bounded by this property. This property is the only thing subject to these community charges and this system. One of the questions that council had asked was, does it make sense to have other properties involved? And my reaction and answer to that, and the developer's reaction to that, is not really, because it's so tied to this financing. You wouldn't want to put unrelated property at risk. And you really want to bound out the community authority to just the boundaries of the territory that you're trying to develop. So for that reason, it's similar to your question. Other properties are not subject to taxes or burdens as a result of this development.
Thank you.
I had a question on who provides the services for this area and how is it paid for? If the tax money is going to pay off bonds, how's the other part of that work?
Good question, Mayor. So you end up with a mixture of service providers. It is within the municipal boundaries. So the city would provide all the regular municipal services to the site, all the things that the city does by law or practice. And the school services, obviously, to the residents who have children, are provided by the school districts, depending on where the boundaries are. So all the regular governmental services are provided. For the school side, they're the most directly impacted by the tax bill. So that's one of the reasons why they'll evaluate the TIF and figure out how to make that work. On the municipal side, there's still underlying property taxes that are due. The abatement doesn't abate existing land value, and the TIF doesn't divert taxes on existing land values. So there'll still be property taxes that come to all the taxing jurisdictions just the same way that are coming in right now.
Madam President,
Yes.
may I ask Mr. Bell a question?
Yes.
Mr. Bell, this is Councilman Ursu. Going back to your presentation, you had a slide with some charts on it, or graphs. On the left side was a column entitled Funded Source, and on the right, Total Uses. That was a gray column.
Yes.
And one of those in the gray column was soft costs.
Yes.
Could you define what you consider to be soft costs in this case?
Yeah, great question. So soft costs are any and all costs that are not brick, stick, steel, mortar, concrete, that kind of cost. So true construction costs would be hard costs of a building. But designing the building is something that you have to pay when you build the building. You got to design the building. You will need, construction insurance. You'll need, title work done. You'll probably have legal expenses. You'll probably have all of these things that are development-related costs that are not themselves hard assets. That's what we refer to when we refer to soft costs. A lot of the design and planning costs. That I don't believe that the gray bar in relation to the other bars is exactly accurate. There's a budget for this. The slide is really just meant to say that that's an element of the cost, but I don't think that it's $50 million worth of soft costs. I think that there's a number, but I'm not sure exactly.
Well, yeah, so that gets to why I asked the question. It looked like that was a pretty sizable part of the gray area, and was wondering if it actually is as substantial as it was shown there.
Yeah, we can get.
It sounded like your answer is that was just more just for presentation purposes to show what goes into that column.
Correct.
But rather than being an actual ratio proportion of what that column is.
Correct. That's correct, Councilman.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mark, you're the only one who did not ask a question, and then we're going to move on to the audience. Would you like to say something?
No,
or-
I'm fine, Eloise.
Okay, thank you.
Council President,
Yes,
do you mind if I ask one question?
I don't mind.
Mr. Bell, one of the issues that jumped out at me in reviewing the statute was the ability of the board of the NCA to assess residents' income. And obviously that might create a conflict where the city of Richmond Heights, which depends mostly on income taxes, determines that it may need to put an issue on the ballot to increase income taxes. And it would seem to me if there is the potential, or actually there is an assessment on the residents in the NCA of their income, that they would not be inclined to support an increase in city income taxes. So I guess my question is, what is your opinion with respect to, if council is so inclined to approve the NCA, placing a condition on the approval that the NCA board not assess resident incomes?
So great question. And I would first note that it's a pretty rare tool that's used. I think there's only maybe 2 NCAs that actually levy any type of income tax-based charge. It's not contemplated in our current model. The model for this site only relies on property taxes. It does not rely on in any way income taxes. And so we're not expecting or requesting an income tax-based charge. I think that it would be, I'm just concerned about the concept of conditioning the approval, as I want to make sure that we're clear under the statute that the creation of the community authority that was requested, its parameters in the petition were satisfied. So the parameters in the petition, I think, are what are available to be, reviewed, accepted, rejected. I would tell you, though, if that's an important consideration for the city, it sounds like it is, we would have no objection to agreeing to that condition. Fundamentally, it's the city's power to appoint those board members that control the authority that I think helps you govern that piece. You can simply, make a condition in the appointment of those members that they're never allowed to vote for that as a way to make sure that this is locked down. Again, my answer is kind of a rambling answer, but it's I don't think we have any objection to that condition. I'm just concerned about it being in a legislative action that somehow conditions the creation of the authority, rather than it being, maybe in the recorded instrument. For example, we would have no objection putting it in the declaration that's recorded on the property. No objection in the city, making sure that that doesn't happen in any other way, for example, by the board appointments. But hopefully that answers your question.
Well, on your last point, although the city has the authority to appoint board members, they don't necessarily control their actions once they're on the board. And secondly, the appointment of the city appointees may not last forever based on the statute. And I guess the third point is the council's action to approve this would not be legislative. It is administrative, in my opinion.
Okay. I don't know that I agree or disagree. I would just point out that the statute says that it's by resolution.
Correct. That's all I have, Madam Council President.
Okay, thank you. So then we will proceed with testimony and questions from the interested parties. So Anyone out in the audience, just let me know if you have any questions. And
Yes, Eloise, this is Rick Lang.
hey, Rick.
Hi.
Hi. The attorney will give you the oath of truthfulness, okay?
And Mr. Lang, after I do that, if you would state your full name and your address for the record, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now and hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God or the penalty of perjury? Just say I do.
I do. Okay, my name is Frederick Lang. My address is 694 Edgewood Road. And my wife and I own property adjacent to the proposed NCA boundary and the development. My question is, does the NCA have any responsibility for daily operation of the facility and compliance with the city code, especially with regard to safety and health? Mr. Bell? You're muted. Okay.
Todd, is it okay if I answer? You want me to
Yeah,
do it this
I
way?
think that that's the intent, that, hate to say this word, but cross-examination perhaps.
No problem. The answer is that the community authority has the legal power to take on operational aspects of the site. It probably won't, though. In reality, what will happen is the owners of the parcels, be they apartment parcels or mixed-use commercial retail parcels, that those owners will have agreements with the tenants about the standard of how the development will be maintained, and that fundamentally it's the property owner's responsibility to maintain the streetscaping and the general kind of street level operational items, trash collection on the street, beautification, to a standard that the tenants would like. So it's possible that the NCA gets assigned that responsibility, but as of right now, that's not contemplated. What would be contemplated is the owners of the buildings essentially would be the ones who are maintaining to a standard. And of course, the city would enforce that standard. If the grass is not mowed, they'll get a notice, and then they'll have to mow it, and then they'll get a nuisance complaint and an assessment, ultimately, if those things are not done correctly, per Mr. Hunt's instructions and guidance to council.
So as an adjacent property owner, our recourse to complain is still to the city, not the NCA.
Yes, my reaction to that would be yes. You would still look to your local government to enforce the maintenance and the setback and sidewalk and all the other kind of things that we rely on in the city to be cared for. Here in this case, the city will have people who are on the NCA board, so it will facilitate, certainly this system will facilitate that information, those complaints, getting to the right parties quickly. But it isn't really a responsibility of the NCA to run down each complaint. Rather, that still remains to be a city responsibility, on the building and other officers of the city.
Even if the NCA takes on operational responsibility.
Well, that's a good point. If the NCA is in a service agreement and the NCA does commit to doing things like mowing the lawn or acting like a homeowners association for the property, then yes, the NCA might be the right source. But I'm just suggesting that that's not the way that the development is anticipating this to work. The NCA would really be mostly about debt service on infrastructure, not about the actual maintenance and operation of the site.
Can the city mandate informing the NCA that it not assume operational responsibility?
I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Hunt. I don't know if the city can abdicate those responsibilities that are within the city boundaries.
Then with regard to the governing board, once the development is basically done and they're meeting once a year, as you predicted, what kind of things would they be deciding at that point, once financing and everything's completed?
It's really and truly a fairly limited program at that point. Really what needs to happen is an annual determination of the community charges and an annual reconciliation of the bond payments. So a lot of this becomes a financial tracking mechanism for the long haul. It's possible that out in the future, as the bonds get paid off, that the people who live within the Belle Oaks Marketplace District decide that they would like to use this NCA mechanism to do things like create a community pool there, or dedicate a park, convert a parking lot into a park. And they would like to use this tax mechanism to pay for those things. That would be citizen-driven, resident-driven, and long into the future, but that's a possibility. The NCA mechanism does not forestall that possibility. It remains a possibility. It's just not something that the developer needs to or intends to activate while these bonds are outstanding. The primary purpose will be to pay the bonds.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Terry Butler here. Do I need to be sworn?
Yes, you do, Mr. Butler. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now and hearing will be truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury?
I do.
And your address, Terry.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the citizens of the city. I'm a 22-year-old, or I wish I was 22-year-old, 22-year resident of the city, living at 474 Celestia Drive in the city of Richmond Heights. This evening's testimony indicated that the entire area, including phases 1 and 2, are indicated or included in the request for NCA. This evening, Attorney Bell referenced to the NCA to be established as a property owner's authority. But the reality is that Deal Point Merrill only owns property in phase 1 at this point. Phase 1 plus the Cube Smart area. I guess I just need to know, to what end is the Richmond Heights City Council being requested this evening to consider approval for an NCA for property that is only partially owned by Deal Point Merrill? And that would be for Attorney Bell. How can we move forward this evening?
Sure, great question. So the NCA statute does not require that the applicant be the owner of the property. The NCA statute indicates that the applicant be a developer who's capable of developing a site that the developer has an option on, or a leasehold on, or ownership of. So it could be ownership, but it could also be a leased property. It could also be a property on which the developer has an option. As is common in development finance, sometimes in order for the property to reach a closing, there needs to be independent agreements between property owner and developer. In other words, it's not always the case that the developer completely owns and controls every piece of ground that they develop. And here, that's the case. The current applicant is not the fee simple owner of all of the property within the community authority today, but they have indicated that, one, they will be, and two, the statute indicates that all that's required is an appropriate option, as well as the developer's management capability to manage this site to a proper development. And we believe that the plan and the development capabilities sections of the petition outline how Deal Point Merrill is capable of concluding the property owner agreements, taking title to all the property. One other little piece on this, just so that there's an understanding point. The item that gets recorded on the ground won't be recorded until such time as Deal Point Merrill owns everything. That item is the only thing that enables the collection of community charges against property as an enforceable item. So until Deal Point owns the ground, really the community authority can't complete its function, which is secured property tax financing.
Okay, just thinking about the authority of city council and how that moves forward on behalf of the citizens of the city. In what ways does Belle Oaks, the anticipated NCA, duplicate any powers or authorities? I think we've touched on some of those things this evening. But are there any powers that really step on or supersede what city council would ordinarily do?
I would tell you that the only real area where you're sure. Yeah. The only real area where there's overlap is in infrastructure development or public assets like roads or sidewalks. The city has the power to do all those things. The community authority has the power to do all those things, to cause the development of a road or a sidewalk or a park. It's really about the payment mechanism. If the city doesn't pay for the park, the NCA can pay for the park. The other things are things like zoning or police powers. The statute expressly excludes those things from the NCA. So the NCA can't do things like provide police services or it can't provide general zoning without, the city, its foundational community doing those things. So the statute makes a bright line there that says, this is really not a municipal corporation. It's not a mini municipal corporation. Instead, what it is it's a development tool. And so where you'll see that overlap is really in public infrastructure development. And that's all based on who can pay for it, who can afford to pay for it. It's how we get those benefits.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Madam President, this is Pat Ackerman. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I rattled a lot of papers. Hello, and I will allow you to be sworn in. Thank you.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury. If so, say, I do.
I do.
And please give your full name and address. Thank you.
Patricia Ackerman, 456 Rushmore Drive. And since I know Mr. Frank is on this Zoom, I want to warn him that I am on good behavior tonight. And while I really was tempted to create an exhaustive list of questions for this hearing, I have restricted myself to 3. And so the first one is, in what locations has Deal Point Merrill been successful in gaining approval of an application to establish an NCA in the last 5 years?
To my knowledge, I don't believe Deal Point Merrill has ever requested the creation of an NCA. It's an Ohio-specific tool. I don't believe they've ever requested one in our state.
Thank you. So that takes care of my second question, which was where had Deal Point Merrill applied other than Richmond Heights to establish an NCA?
I would add here that this concept of NCA came from California originally, back in the early 1960s, and Ohio also adopted it shortly after that in the 1960s. So it's been around for a while, and so maybe Mr. Frank can answer that question. I don't know. In another state where it may have, they may have used something similar to this.
Well, that sort of appreciates a part of my final question. And if Mr. Frank is going to be sworn in so that he can respond, I guess you'll make that happen. But here's the question. Has the Richmond Heights City Council completed its own due diligence regarding NCAs by contacting communities in Ohio or other states where NCAs have been created to ascertain the advantages and or disadvantages If so, what was discovered? If not, will such due diligence be undertaken and when?
This is Brian Gleiser. I don't know, Todd, if I need to be sworn in. I'm Economic Development Director for the City of Richmond Heights.
You should be, yes.
Okay.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now and hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury?
I do. In answer to your question, we have not contacted communities as yet that have an NCA. I have done research and read about them, the other communities, and also talked to, I talked to officials in Shaker Heights and also a developer at Pinecrest as to whether they had considered using an NCA. So yes, we've done a little bit of due diligence, but I have not reached out as yet to those communities that have an active NCA.
But you will.
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Cassandra, Councilwoman Cassandra. I have reached out to, because I didn't know what the NCA was myself, because it's new to the community. I did reach out to someone in Columbus who have used the NCA, and they use it for commercial and for parking areas in that area. So they do use it, but their risk is very low there. But being with our city, I was informed that we need to just double check and find out what the severity of building apartments are. How difficult is it to build apartment versus commercial? If it was commercial businesses, parking lots, then they informed me that there would be a good tool. So I really want to reach out even more. I also reached out to Shaker Heights as well. And I'm waiting for other ones to get back. So I would like to do my due diligence to find out the pros and the cons.
Madam Chairman, Councilman Lentine.
Okay, I'm chairwoman. Chairwoman,
What did I say? Did I misspeak?
chairman.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Okay, just
the question that the resident has, as long as Mr. Frank is on this Zoom telecast, perhaps he might want to take the opportunity to speak to it about possibly having any projects in his own state of California that we might be able to be apprised of. Is Mr. Frank there, and would he consider addressing this question? Madam Chairman.
Madam Chair, I said it again. Yes, not.
It doesn't seem to be.
no.
It looks like he's.
Hi, this is David Frank. Sorry, I'm just learning technology here. I'd be happy to be sworn in.
Placed under oath, please.
Yeah.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case now and hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury? If so, say, I do.
I do.
Identify yourself.
David Franks, CEO of Deal Point, Merrill.
Proceed, please.
Can you, I believe there's a question pending. Can you please repeat that?
If I may, Mrs. Council President, the question was,
Yes,
Mr.
please.
Frank, the question was, Mr. Frank, that whether you had any experience applying for and using the NCA model in Ohio, and Mr. Bell said he did not believe so. And then I followed up to say that this NCA concept started in California before Ohio adopted it in the late 1960s, I believe. And so I said, it may be good to ask you whether you or your company has ever used the NCA type model in another state.
The answer is we've never used the NCA in another state. And we became familiar with the NCA opportunity when we first started looking into it while we were developing properties in Ohio and Cleveland specifically.
Okay, Dr. Ackerman, do you have another question for him or a question period? Thank you, Mr. Frank.
No, I appreciate his answer. I think the answer is really quite illuminating. It does raise some concern for me, but I won't ask any more questions. I will defer to other neighbors who probably have questions.
Okay.
Madam President, Jeremy Cumin, I do have a question.
All right, Mr. Cumin, you will be sworn in.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury. If so, say, I do. Identify yourself and your address.
Jeremy Cumin, 4920 Foxlair Trail. My question's an open-ended question for whoever would like to answer it. My understanding is that the resolution in front of council today only gives the authority to form the NCA, but it is not an obligation on the part of the city to actually form it if the project does not proceed. But the authority that the council would grant by passing the resolution is necessary for Mr. Franks to secure the financing that he requires for the project to move forward. So while it's important to pass it expeditiously, it doesn't actually obligate the city to form the NCA if in fact the project does not proceed.
Well, I will answer the first part of your question, Mr. Cumin, and that is there's no resolution pending before council at this time in terms of a written form. And then I think Mr. Bell can probably answer the remainder of your question.
Sure, happy to. You know, the statute requires the city upon this hearing to determine whether or not the standard of review has been satisfied. And if so, the city shall, by resolution, declare the authority to be organized. So the very next action that the city takes on this question of creating the community authority will result in the creation of the community authority. It is to be organized. However, I think your point is well taken that the creation of the authority does not burden the property with community charges, nor does it result in there being a business deal between the city and the developer or the school district, nor does it, you know, make any of the choices that the city might still make in respect of the economics of this transaction. It's just a separate item. It's creating this district and requiring the district to be organized. As we noted in the presentation, there's a number of actions that still need to occur. And many of those actions are substantive and economic choices that the city needs to be making. Most of that activity is yet before us and will come following the creation of the community authority. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I would like to speak.
yes.
Mr. Brown,
Brown.
do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury? If so, say, I do.
I do. My name is Jackie Brown, resident at 488 Tally Ho Lane, resident for 20 years. And this question is a result of reading Sunday's Cleveland.com article, as well as some other articles that have been in the news lately. Given seemingly the contentious nature of the current relationship between the city of Richmond Heights and the Richmond Heights schools, would it be advantageous for Deal Point Merrill to offer itself as a mediator or to facilitate mediation? And this is open to whomever.
Well, from the representing the developer, I think that an important condition in a transaction like this, in a relationship, really relationship's a good word. You use a great word. Relationship between these entities. There will be a long-term relationship between the property owner of this site and the city and the school district. That much is certain. And so, to the extent that the development can bring these two parties together to make some important choices over the long haul, I think that's kind of going to happen. It's almost inevitable by default. The developer, as the optioner on the property, is causing these two parties to talk about taxes and to talk about how these things should work. For its own interests, the developer is concerned about making sure to pay on those bonds and making sure that we have sufficient revenue to do that. But for the interest of the city and the school district, it's really important that those two parties, use perhaps this as a catalyst to a positive relationship and a positive, arrangement about this site, certainly. So I think the developer's happy to be in that conversation because it is important for the site. But maybe there's a little bit of a collateral benefit there for everybody to see that conversation happen.
Thank you.
And I think I can respond to that. What we're talking about this evening is an issue with Belle Oaks Phase 1 and Phase 2, and there is, as Mr. Bell has said, a requirement that the school district approve a TIF, the city approve a TIF. And my experience in negotiating TIFs in other communities is that the three parties sit down together and work that through. And that will have to happen with respect to this development. And if everybody decides to adhere to the developer's proposed schedule, that may happen soon. So I think that's the response.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Madam Chair, I have several questions. Judy McElroy.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Ms. McElroy, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury? If so, say I do.
Judy McElroy, 22180 Harms Road. In addition to being a resident of Richmond Heights, I am also the treasurer of the Concerned Taxpayers of Richmond Heights. My first question, what would the qualifications be for appointment to serve on a Belle Oaks NCA board, and who would conduct the appointment process?
Well, Ms. McElroy, if I may, the city appointees are within the discretion of city council. Frankly, the council president can weigh in on this, but I don't believe there has been any discussion at this point as to who may be appointed to the board. There is a very short time window between if this is approved by council, there is a 10-day time frame within which to make those appointments.
Okay, given that there is a 10-day time period, do you think that's sufficient time for proper vetting of any prospective NCA board members? Or has that been already predetermined? I don't know.
I don't believe so, but I will defer to the council president on that question.
It doesn't seem like a lot of time or sufficient time for me, 10 days, but that is the case. That is the law.
And there's nothing stopping council from discussing that immediately following this hearing either, so.
Okay, well, that leads me into my next question. Given the sustained and consistent interest in the Bell Oaks project that the concerned taxpayers of Richmond Heights has demonstrated since the fall of 2018, if the NCA is approved, when will the organization, the concerned taxpayers of Richmond Heights, be contacted to identify one of its members to sit on the NCA board?
As to the developer representatives, I would say that the developer has made it clear that it needs to have 3 appointees. That's a standard for community authorities under the statute. It would likely have 2 of the principals of Bell Oaks and then 1 local professional, serving as the 3. The developer has no objection to, other interested groups being, selected as the city's representatives. The developer has no expectation that for 30 years, all 3 of its representatives will be needed to be appointed by the developer. It's possible that as the financing gets settled, that 1 or more of the developer representatives can be replaced by citizens. Probably most likely it would be a citizen that lives within the district or would be perhaps a business or property owner in the district. But those are all factors. The developer is just coming at this from a project management perspective, and it's important to have their finger on the pulse of it certainly until the financing gets settled. And there'll be a development period where we're building buildings, so that'll take a while to settle out.
And from a council side, as far as I'm concerned, you can submit names as soon as possible if we have 10 days, So better to have the names if you have names to submit than to not have them.
I want to make it very, very clear that the 10 days does not start to run until council approves the NCA. There's no time limit between this hearing and the approval of the NCA in the statute.
Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, another question, if I may, for Attorney Bell.
Yes.
Just wondering how the statute reads with respect to numbers of members on the NCA. We have said that there are 7, but is that limited by statute, or is that an open number that is possibly changed?
It can go higher. Caleb, you can give the details.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the number could be higher. You must have at least 3, not more than 6 citizen members, and then there's 1 local government member added to the 3 or added to the 6. So in other words, there's between 4 and 7 local government representatives. If there are 7, that requires the developer to appoint 6 people. So a board of 13 would be a very large board. And in my experience with new community authorities in Ohio, I have not seen one with more than 7, primarily because 7 tends to be workable, odd, it's an odd number, and there's sufficient representation to do what is really a more limited job than a general purpose government anyway.
Madam President, I do have one follow-up question, if I might.
Yes, you may.
What happens, and whoever, again, can answer this, what happens if you don't approve the NCA? And is there some deadline that needs to be met from the developer's standpoint as to when this agreement has to happen?
Yeah, if the city is not in a position to proceed with the NCA, then the development will likely cease. I'm in receipt of communications from the developer that indicate that they really need to move on this project, and have requested that the city conclude appointing representatives here in May. So I think you're at the point where the timing is just not going to work for the site if we are slipping very far. The statute does have this 10-day time frame. You know, in all the community authority hearings that I've been involved with, the local government has immediately, upon the hearing, you know, taken the action by resolution to approve the creation of the NCA or reject it. You know, assuming that parties are interested in pursuing this development, an approval would need to be pretty much imminent so that we can get to appointing a board, so that we can get to organizing the board, so that we can get to one of multiple rounds of financing for this project in a time frame that doesn't materially impact the development. So I think that the developer is pretty much at the point where they need to see this going forward, or we're probably going to have a failed development. And you know, so that's the communications that I've received that I'm able to share.
Any more questions? Okay. Mr. Bale, I think your name is Bale.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Cassandra. I have just one more question. May I?
Yeah, do you want to go home tonight?
Yeah, I'm going. I'm at home, baby. I just get dressed. Can I ask you how and why Richmond Heights was selected?
I would tell you, as representative of the developer, to my knowledge, they selected a site that had an appropriate asset for redevelopment, and that's the mall site. I think that Deal Point has experience in looking at malls across the country and bringing them back online with new uses. You know, I would, that's about the extent of my knowledge on this point, though. I would turn it to Mr. Frank if he's got further comment on that. But I think the availability of the asset was a primary driver in selecting Richmond Heights. It's a good opportunity for a site that could handle the type of extensive redevelopment activity that's required to really create a place. And the placemaking is part of the regular business of this developer.
Good.
Thank you,
Councilwoman. Good question. Thank you. Any more questions? All right, Mr. Bale, do you have any, what is it, but rebuttals and or summary statements?
No, you know, Madam Councilwoman, I think that we would have answered all the rebuttals during the course of the presentation. So I'm comfortable leaving it at that.
All right. Well, what council is going to do is we're going to discuss this at another time before we make a decision about this. So this meeting will be adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for your time. All right. Leave that.